Linnea Bergström was the heart of Ängsjö, a girl whose laughter echoed through the quiet village streets. Until the morning she vanished without a trace, leaving her parents, Eric and Hanna, clutching at the fragile threads of hope. In the heart of Sweden, the small village of Ängsjö rested like a postcard come to life. Surrounded by thick forests and bordered by a glistening lake, it was the epitome of tranquility. The kind of place where doors were left unlocked and children played freely in the streets. Ängsjö was a haven for those seeking peace away from the chaos of city life. Its population of just over 500 people prided themselves on their strong sense of community. Generations of families lived side by side, their lives intricately intertwined by shared history and tradition. Among these families were the Bergströms, Eric, Hanna, and their only daughter, Linnea. 16-year-old Linnea was a bright and cheerful girl, well loved by everyone who knew her. She had an infectious laugh and a kindness that endeared her to the entire village. Whether it was helping her elderly neighbor carry groceries or tutoring her classmates in math, Linnea's generosity seemed endless. She worked part-time at the village bakery, waking up early every Saturday to help bake bread and pastries. Customers often remarked that her presence seemed to light up the tiny shop. It was on a Saturday morning in January 2008 that Linnea first disappeared. The day began like any other. Snow blanketed the ground, muffling the sounds of the waking village. The bakery owner, Karen, opened the shop at 6 a.m., expecting Linnea to arrive shortly after. By 7 a.m., there was no sign of her. Karen assumed she might have overslept. Rare, but not impossible. She decided to give it another hour. By 8 a.m., worry began to creep in. Linnea had never missed a shift without notice. At the Bergström house, Eric and Hanna were growing anxious as well. Linnea's bed was empty, though it had been neatly made, and her coat and boots were gone. It looked as if she had left early for work. Her phone sat on her bedside table, something completely out of character for a teenager who was always glued to it. The sight of the phone sent a chill through Hanna. Eric, trying to stay calm, suggested they call Karen to check if Linnea had arrived. When Karen confirmed that Linnea wasn't at the bakery, panic set in. Eric and Hanna retraced their daughter's usual route to work, but found no sign of her. As the hours passed, more villagers joined the search. Dark snowfall from the previous night had softened the ground, leaving behind only a faint trail of footprints leading into the forest behind the Bergström home. The footprints abruptly ended at a dense thicket, as if Linnea had simply vanished into thin air. By evening, the local authorities were called in. Search parties combed the forest, their flashlights casting eerie shadows among the trees. Dogs were brought in to track her scent, but the trail went cold near the lake's edge. Despite the freezing temperatures, divers searched the icy waters, but nothing was found. Linnea was gone, and with her disappearance came a suffocating silence that fell over Ängsjö. In a village where nothing ever happened, the vanishing of Linnea Bergström was a thunderclap that shattered their peace. Neighbors gathered in hushed circles, whispering theories and fears. For the Bergströms, the nightmare was only beginning. As the sun set on that first day without Linnea, the serene facade of Ängsjö began to crack, revealing shadows that no one had ever dared to look for. The disappearance of Linnea Bergström left Ängsjö shaken, but the unease only deepened when the anonymous letters began arriving. It was 3 weeks after Linnea vanished when the first envelope appeared in the Bergström family's mailbox. There was no return address, no stamp, and no indication of who might have sent it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its message scrawled in uneven handwriting. The forest knows. Eric and Hanna stared at the cryptic note, their confusion quickly turning to dread. Was it a cruel joke, or did it mean something more sinister? The police were notified, but they found little to investigate. The paper was unremarkable, the ink common, and there were no fingerprints. Still, the letter raised new questions. Did someone know what had happened to Linnea? If so, why not come forward? The unanswered questions hung heavy over the household, deepening the Bergströms' despair. Days later, a second letter arrived. This time, the message read, "Secrets grow in the silence." The implication was clear. Someone in the village was withholding information. Eric and Hanna felt trapped in a nightmare, unsure of whom to trust. The once friendly faces of their neighbors now seemed shrouded in suspicion. Conversations became stilted. Glances lingered too long, and a palpable tension spread through Ängsjö like a fog. By the time the third letter arrived, the community was on edge. Unlike the first two, this note was more personal. She never told you everything, did she? It was signed with a single initial, A. The cryptic nature of the letters frustrated investigators, who had few leads to follow. The messages seemed designed to torment the family, not to provide any real answers. But they suggested one undeniable truth. Whoever was sending them knew something about Linnea's disappearance. The focus of the investigation shifted. Instead of searching for Linnea in the wilderness, the police began questioning villagers more aggressively. Friendships and family bonds strained under the weight of scrutiny. Rumors swirled about long-buried feuds, financial disputes, and unspoken grievances. Old secrets resurfaced, pulling Ängsjö's idyllic reputation into question. One name kept coming up in whispered conversations: Agnes Lindahl. Agnes, a reserved woman in her 50s, had lived in the village her entire life. She was known for her reclusive nature and peculiar habits, but nothing about her had ever suggested she was dangerous. Still, neighbors recalled seeing her wandering near the forest late at night, often muttering to herself. Others mentioned how Agnes had grown increasingly erratic after the sudden closure of her job at a nearby psychiatric hospital the year before. When the police visited Agnes, she was cooperative, but evasive. She claimed to know nothing about Linnea's disappearance or the letters. Her alibi for the morning Linnea went missing was shaky at best, but there wasn't enough evidence to link her to the case. The investigators left, but suspicion lingered. Agnes's connection to the now-abandoned hospital and her odd behavior added an unsettling layer to the mystery. Meanwhile, the Bergströms continued to receive letters, each one more cryptic than the last. The messages began to hint at a hidden truth, something that Linnea herself had kept secret. The suggestion that their daughter might have been involved in something dangerous before her disappearance was almost too much for Eric and Hannah to bear. Their grief was compounded by a gnawing sense of guilt. Had they missed the signs? The letters accomplished one thing above all else. They shattered the fragile trust that had held the village together. Neighbors became strangers, and a shadow of fear loomed over Ängsjö. As winter dragged on, it became clear that the peace the village once knew was gone forever. 2 months after Linnea's disappearance, a group of hikers stumbled upon something chilling in the dense forest that bordered Ängsjö. It was a dilapidated cabin, long forgotten and hidden among the tall pines. The structure was small and unassuming, its wooden boards warped by years of harsh weather. But when the hikers stepped inside, they were met with a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The air inside was heavy, the musty scent of decay mixed with something metallic. On the central table sat Linnea's school bag, unmistakable with its bright pink color and keychain shaped like a sunflower. Surrounding the bag were burned-down candles, their wax melted into jagged pools on the wooden surface. The cabin's walls were even more disturbing. They were covered with strange symbols and cryptic messages written in charcoal, phrases like, "The offering must be pure," and "The forest remembers." The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. For weeks, the forest had been combed by search parties, yet no one had stumbled upon this sinister hideout until now. Authorities swarmed the area, treating the cabin as a crime scene. The bag was confirmed to belong to Linnea, but there was no other trace of her. Not a strand of hair, not a single fingerprint. The investigation took an even darker turn when cadaver dogs led officers to a patch of disturbed earth near the cabin. Digging revealed shallow graves, each containing skeletal remains. Initial examinations suggested the bodies belonged to 3 individuals, all reported missing over the past decade. 2 were young women in their 20s, and 1 was a man in his 40s. None had any known connection to Linnea or to each other. The village was plunged into hysteria. What had started as a tragic disappearance now appeared to be part of something far more sinister. Rumors of a cult operating in the area spread like wildfire. The symbols in the cabin, combined with the carefully staged scene, fueled speculation that Linnea's disappearance was linked to ritualistic practices. The idea of a hidden cult existing in their quiet village was almost too horrifying to fathom, but the evidence pointed in that direction. The police intensified their investigation, scouring the forest for additional clues. Forensic experts worked to analyze the writing on the cabin walls, hoping to trace it back to its author. Linguistic patterns suggested that whoever had written the messages was meticulous and deeply familiar with occult symbolism. This finding only deepened the mystery. Was this the work of a single individual, or was there a group involved? Meanwhile, the Bergström family was caught in a vortex of fear and uncertainty. The discovery of the cabin offered no solace, it only raised more questions. Hannah clung to the hope that Linnea might still be alive, while Eric feared the worst. The graves near the cabin suggested a grim possibility that Linnea might have been abducted by the same person or group responsible for these other murders. Despite the mounting evidence, no clear suspects emerged. The graves and the cabin seemed to exist in isolation, tied together only by the dark intent behind them. The only clue that seemed to hold any promise was a single object found inside one of the graves, a locket. Inside the locket was a photograph of Linnea with her best friend, Sophia. The locket was a mystery in itself. It didn't belong to Linnea or her family, and Sophia had never seen it before. Its presence in a grave linked to an apparent ritual site suggested a connection that no one could explain. As investigators tried to piece together how this single object tied Linnea to the other victims, the discovery of the cabin marked a turning point. What had once been a search for a missing girl was now a hunt for answers in a chilling web of secrets, lies, and unimaginable darkness. As investigators delved deeper into the mystery, the discovery of the locket took center stage. The photograph of Linnea and her best friend Sophia raised more questions than it answered. Sophia, who had been close to Linnea since childhood, was initially stunned by the revelation. She claimed to have no knowledge of the locket or how it could have ended up in a shallow grave near the cabin. Despite her shock, the police began scrutinizing her life more closely. Sophia lived with her mother, Agnes Lindahl, a reserved woman who had drawn suspicion since Linnea's disappearance. Agnes had always been a peculiar figure in Ängsjö, quiet, reclusive, and prone to solitary walks in the forest. Her connection to the abandoned psychiatric hospital, where she had worked as a caretaker until its closure the year before, only deepened the intrigue surrounding her. When questioned again, Agnes admitted to having spent time in the forest, but insisted she had nothing to do with Linnea's disappearance or the locket. She claimed her nocturnal walks were her way of coping with stress and denied any involvement in ritualistic practices. Investigators, however, weren't convinced. Her evasive answers and her connection to the psychiatric hospital raised red flags. A breakthrough came when the police began reviewing records from the hospital where Agnes had worked. Among the former patients was a man named Gunnar Löfgren, who had been treated for obsessive-compulsive behaviors and delusions tied to ritualistic beliefs. Gunnar had been released shortly before the hospital closed, and his file included troubling notes about his fascination with purification rituals and sacrifices. Gunnar became a person of interest, and investigators tracked him to a neighboring town. When they interviewed him, Gunnar openly admitted to visiting the cabin in the forest. He described it as a place of cleansing and claimed he had been drawn to it by someone he referred to as the Oracle. According to Gunnar, the Oracle was a woman who had guided him in understanding the sacred order of the forest. The police were stunned when Gunnar identified Agnes Lindahl as the Oracle. He claimed Agnes had held secretive meetings at the cabin, where she spoke of protecting the village from a great darkness. Gunnar insisted that he had only followed her instructions and had nothing to do with Linnea's disappearance. Faced with this accusation, Agnes initially denied everything. But as investigators presented evidence tying her to the cabin and its rituals, cracks began to appear in her story. Witnesses came forward, recalling Agnes's increasingly erratic behavior in the months leading up to Linnea's disappearance. Some had seen her carrying strange objects into the forest, while others remembered cryptic remarks she had made about cleansing the village. As the pressure mounted, Agnes finally admitted to leading the rituals in the cabin, but denied harming Linnea. She claimed the rituals were symbolic, a way to restore balance to the village. When pressed about the graves and the locket, Agnes's composure faltered. She insisted she had no idea how the locket had ended up there, but her refusal to explain further only deepened the suspicion against her. While Agnes awaited formal charges, the investigation took a new turn. If Linnea wasn't in the graves, could she still be alive? And if so, where was she? As the community grappled with the revelations, the search for Linnea became more urgent than ever. The haunting possibility that she had been hidden away by Agnes, or someone connected to her, kept the village on edge. The shadow of doubt hung heavy over Ängsjö, and the once quiet village became a hotbed of speculation and fear. For the Bergströms, the nightmare seemed endless. Every revelation brought them closer to understanding what had happened to their daughter, yet the truth remained just out of reach. The sense of hope that Linnea might still be alive was the only thing keeping them going, even as the darkness surrounding her disappearance seemed to grow deeper with every passing day. The investigation into Linnea's disappearance reached a fever pitch as the police unraveled the twisted connections surrounding Agnes Lindahl. Her admission of leading rituals in the cabin was disturbing enough, but it didn't explain everything. Most importantly, it left the question of Linnea's whereabouts unanswered. Agnes maintained that she had not harmed the girl, but her refusal to explain the full extent of her actions left authorities and the Bergström family in agonizing suspense. A turning point came when forensic experts revisited the shallow graves near the cabin. One grave contained not only bones but also a fragment of fabric partially buried in the soil. The fabric matched a scarf Linnea had been wearing on the day she disappeared. This discovery reignited fears that she might not have survived, but the lack of a body still left a glimmer of hope. Investigators began to consider that Agnes might have been hiding more than she admitted. Under mounting pressure, Agnes confessed to a chilling series of events. She claimed that Linnea had been chosen as the final offering in her rituals. According to Agnes, the rituals were meant to protect the village from an impending darkness she believed would consume it. She explained that her work at the psychiatric hospital had exposed her to individuals who reinforced these delusions, particularly Gunnar Löfgren. Together, they had constructed a belief system centered on the idea that the forest held both power and secrets that could be harnessed through sacrifice. Agnes described how she had lured Linnea into the forest under false pretenses. But what happened next took an unexpected turn. Linnea, realizing the danger she was in, managed to escape during the ritual. In the chaos, she fled deeper into the forest, leaving Agnes and Gunnar unable to find her. Agnes claimed she had assumed Linnea would succumb to the cold or the wilderness, but she insisted she had not pursued her further. This revelation sparked a renewed search, this time focused on the possibility that Linnea might still be alive somewhere in the forest. For days, teams combed the woods, revisiting areas they had previously searched. It was during this exhaustive effort that a faint trail was discovered, leading to an abandoned mine hidden among the trees. Inside the mine, searchers found Linnea. She was alive but severely malnourished and traumatized. She had survived on snowmelt and what little food she could scavenge, too terrified to leave the mine for fear of being found by her captors. When she was rescued, Linnea's fragile condition underscored the horror of her ordeal. But her resilience amazed everyone. Through tearful accounts, Linnea described how Agnes had manipulated her, promising to reveal ancient truths in the forest before turning on her. Her escape had been a desperate act of courage, and her survival in the harsh winter conditions was nothing short of miraculous. Her return brought relief to the Bergström family and the community, but it also exposed the depth of the darkness that had festered in Ängsjö. Agnes and Gunnar were both arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including the deaths of the individuals found in the graves. The trial revealed more details of their disturbing belief system, horrifying the nation. Ängsjö, once a symbol of peace, became synonymous with one of Sweden's most harrowing crimes. Linnea's story, however, became one of survival against impossible odds. Her strength and determination to endure the unthinkable captured hearts across Sweden, reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments, hope could prevail. Though the scars of her experience would remain, Linnea's survival offered a light in the shadow of the tragedy, ensuring that her story would never be forgotten.